All right. Well, because we've got potentially a lot to discuss, um, even though it's not a formal meeting, we'll note the beginning time, which is 7:02 Mountain. And I would like to note who's here, Madam Secretary, if you wanted to take a roll of the committee members, they're not required to attend, but I'd like to have a record of it. So if you could do that while I'm still letting people in, and then we'll get started. And you're on mute, Sylvia. You're always on mute when you shouldn't be.
And vice versa. Arrowwood present. Bracco. Paul Bracco.
Present.
Thanks. Nicholas Sazelski.
I am here.
Right. Carlos.
I'm here.
All right. Latham. Rob Latham.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Frank Martin.
Present.
Ken Molman. Ken Molman. Come back to him. Tom Rowlett.
Here.
All right. Mike Ruffo.
Here.
Mike Seebeck. Ken Molman. Madam Chair, Ken Molman is not here as yet.
And he is coming. I got a notification that he joined the old link. And he just now registered for this meeting. So I'm going to approve his registration. But if you could do the alternates, that would be great.
Sure. Chuck Moulton.
Present.
Rich Tomaso. Rich Tomaso. Okay. Dave Roberson. Dave Roberson. Greg Deal. Greg Deal. Okay. Roger Roots.
Present.
Thank you. Data Logan. Data Logan. Okay. Dean Rogers. Dean Rogers. Madam Chair, we have A1 Chuck Moulton and A5 Roger Roots here for the alternates.
All right, thank you. Notice we have some repeat visitors from the last town hall, but also some new folks. So I'd like to explain the way we do this. Hopefully, you didn't have to, but hopefully the guests have had an opportunity to at least take somewhat of a perusal through the town hall package that was sent with the registration. And the way we generally work this is member driven. The town hall is for the members. So if you have questions on any proposal, if you would raise your hand and we will answer questions and hear input. If you have input on perhaps proposals that aren't in the report, but you would like us to think about, if there are people who wish to discuss ones that we've already made, I would like to dedicate the most time to that. But if there really isn't like a huge line, feel free to talk about proposals that aren't in the report because we may have them on the docket and just not passed yet. This has been a very busy committee. For those of you who don't know, we started meeting in January and we've met every other week since January. So this has been an extraordinarily hardworking committee and I thank them. And that's one reason why we had so many proposals. One thing that can be confusing with the report right now is we do have overlapping proposals, meaning there are several proposals for some of the same articles. We will organize those in a logical manner when presented at convention, where one will build upon the other. but we do understand that can be confusing right now. And in a couple instances, they're mutually exclusive. And depending upon member input, we will most likely on the mutually exclusive ones have to choose between one and the other would end up being a minority report. So please raise your hands. If the conversation lags or, there's nobody who has questions at first, we're just going to start at the beginning and just briefly mention what the proposals do. And then if there's questions, people can raise their hands. This is our second town hall, and I believe we were up through L the first time, but again, there's people who weren't here for the first one. So we're not just starting where we left off. It's open for discussion from A forward. So including any committee members, you can raise your hand. If there isn't members ahead of you, we are going to give precedent to party members here. So on your Zoom screen, look for reactions, and there's the raise hand feature. And I'm going to share my screen, which will have the report, so we can all follow along.
Point of privilege, Madam Chair.
Yes, Dr. Moulton.
Ken Molman has informed me he sent a request from other email addresses in case his main one was too slow. So could you check the queue?
I did, and there are, I think he just joined the room. Is he in here? Did Mr. Molman come? I see he registered again with a different address. One moment, and I'm going to stop my share because in order to approve these, I have to go into the Zoom control panel, which shows people's email addresses, and I don't want to have those violate anyone's privacy. And unless it's a committee member and urgent, I'm not going to be approving any more registrations. People did need to register before the meeting.
Madam Chair, Ken is listed with what appears to be on the phone and muted.
Well, I did approve his other two email addresses, if that will help him. Otherwise, he will be in chat.
I am here now.
Perfect. Let me restart my share. And as I said, I'm not going to be approving any more registrations. Okay, it's up on the screen. Still giving it a second to see if there are any hands raised. Otherwise, we're just going to go from the beginning. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so let's scroll down. And the structure of the report is, and before I get to proposal A, in the beginning of the report, you can see there are some links which members might find helpful. There's the timeline that we're working with. It's always a bit fluid. The committee can always overrule or change that timeline. We have the master proposal sheet, which shows all the proposals that we've worked on, what the vote totals were, where you can look at them. We have a working copy of the amended bylaws and convention rules with markup language, so you can see it all in one spot. And if you go to the Lpedia page, all of our proposals are there, all of our minutes are there, all of our video links. It's kind of the one-stop shop for the committee. And if I happen to miss someone's hand, because when I'm screen sharing, Zoom decides it doesn't want to show me the participants list very well, just, unmute your mic and yell if I miss you. All right. So we're going to go somewhat rapidly through the ones we did last town hall, but interrupt, raise your hand if there are any questions. So in proposal A, it's to clarify the bylaws on what happens in the case that the LNC chair position becomes vacant. This was an item of controversy last term. And, you know, as Roberts recommends, if there's something that the body finds ambiguous, that ambiguous bylaw should be clarified at the first, as soon as practicable. Mr. Sweeney.
Apologies for the interruption. I did have a question. I'm not sure if it's a point of information or how that wants to work. I want to ask if there's been a roll call with the votes in the report.
Yes, if you go to the minutes on the Elpedia page,
Okay.
all of the roll calls are in there.
Great.
And
I appreciate that.
just as a point of information, and I'm muting you, Mr. Lambert, because there's some background noise. That even though this is a smaller committee, 10 people, I still don't vote. It's a voluntary choice I made. It's not a requirement, but unless it's to cause or break a tie, I generally abstain from all votes. That shouldn't be taken as an opinion on the relative strength or lack thereof, since most of the ones I abstain on are ones I even propose. I just try to zealously guard my neutrality with the committee. All right, so proposal A is to clarify the chair ascension procedure, and the side that the committee came on is that the vice chair automatically becomes chair in the event of a vacancy, leaving a vacancy in vice chair, which would then be filled by the committee, the LNC, meaning the committee. Proposal B is to raise membership dues, the yearly membership dues from, okay, hold on, I see somebody is coming in, is to raise the dues from $25 to $50. They haven't changed. Oh, Dr. Moulton could give us the figure. I think it's, 2006. Mr. Maligan.
Quick question on proposal A. I assume that the vice chair ascends to the chair. The LNC chooses the vice chair. In that situation, that term is filled out until convention. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's not interim. Okay.
Right. So we'll just use this LNC as an example. If for some reason the chair was vacant, then Mr. Watkins would automatically become chair. The new vacancy would be in the position of vice chair, and the LNC would fill that vacancy. Did you have any further? Because your little yellow hand's still raised. Okay, Mr.
Oh,
Madden.
it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be brown, but I can change that later.
Mr. Madden.
Yes, I just wanted to make a quick comment about this because here in Arizona, we have a similar ascension procedure, but it also includes the officers in order. And so similar to, I believe it's Amendment 25 of the United States Constitution, in which you would have a chain of ascendancy rather than a single going up and then whatnot. Would the committee be amenable to including something like that where the other officers are also in line?
I'm going to see what committee members wish to answer, but I'm going to address that. Our other officers are treasurer and secretary. People run for skill sets. I don't want to. I would be next in line. If I wanted to be vice chair or chair, I would have ran for vice chair or chair. And I'm sure the treasurer doesn't want to become secretary. And those are two specialized positions that you don't want to move people out of. You know, people elect secretaries and treasurers because of a very specific skill set. The chair and the vice chair have similar skill sets. The vice chair in Roberts is generally considered to be the spare chair. So if you lose the chair, then you get the spare. Sorry, Mr. Watkins. But if any other committee members wish to address that, please raise your hand. Okay, doesn't look like it. I think they probably were satisfied with what I said. So B is to raise membership dues. This has been attempted in the past and failed. people generally don't want to cost themselves more money. However, we have not raised our dues since 2006. So we definitely have not kept up with inflation. So we'll see. So we did it from 25 to 50. Mr. Molman.
Yes, actually, I wanted to get clarification. What
You cut-
Dr. Moulton was saying is that the LNC set the dues, or the convention body set the dues at $25 in 2006 after some controversy had occurred. I can't remember the whole deal because I was brand new then, but there was a controversy of some sort. But prior to that, the LNC got to set the dues, and I think it was $25, other than maybe for a 1 or 2 year period before the convention body said, no, we wanted it at 25. Well, they went 25 even further back.
It might
I
have
can
their.
clarify
go
that
ahead.
if you want.
Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead, Dr. Moulton,
yeah,
and then
but
we'll go to
for-
Mr. Maligan.
Previously, the LNC had the ability to set the dues, and it's been 25 for many years before that. The LNC briefly hiked dues up to $50 and then set dues to $0, eliminating it. And then the convention body took it out of the hands of the LNC and set it in the bylaws because they thought it was ridiculous that the LNC could set it at 0.
Hey, Mr. Molman, did you have anything further?
Nope, I just didn't take my hand down. Sorry, thank you.
Oh, no problem, Mr. Maligan.
We're looking at raising dues here in California as well, and I was curious as to what the rationale was for a 100% increase. We were kind of antsy about even a 20% increase because people would kind of about it. Such a sudden change, and then obviously I understand inflation on our side too, but it also affects everybody else. What was the rationale for 100% versus something a bit more palatable to the majority of people?
Well, because they haven't been raised in so long, and the convention can amend it. We don't have scope of notice, which is something we're going to deal with later. It's kind of crazy pants, but our bylaws don't require notice. So in theory, the convention could make it any figure that they want. They could even go higher, which you normally couldn't do with scope of notice. You could only do lower between, you could do lower. But we don't have that. So we put a figure out there that we thought was realistic and would bring in more of what needs to be brought in, understanding that the convention can and likely would amend it down.
So this is more of a negotiate. You start high, and then whatever is palatable to people, they would lower it if they wanted to, and then we'd call it a day.
Yeah, this is what we think it should be, but it needs to be more than 25. But we'll see. It might end up just being 25. Mr. Madden and Mr. Molman.
Yes, Madam Chair. Have we figured what the complete increase in cost of for adjusting for cost of inflation would be?
Mr. Molman has that information, and that might be why he raised his hand. Mr. Molman?
It is why I raised my hand. So I don't know the exact figures for all of time. What I do know is that Kentucky set their dues to adjust to we have an automatic thing that happens mathematically because that's how that works. And so the point is that $5 in 1971 now comes up to $37.50 July of this year. So that's $5.71 when they took us off the gold standard is now over 7 times, in a dollar figure, the same value. Going from 25, assuming that, and I believe it did go back at least into the 90s, $25, adjusted for inflation today, E hits 50. It's probably actually more, just because just from 2000, we put that in. It was $30 and it was under $30, and now we're creeping up on, and then we went to 40. And I mean, the rate things are going by the end of not next year, but the year after, we're going to go up to 45, just because inflation is a little, if no one's noticed. We only get to set the dues once every 2 years. I have a feeling that by the time we get to convention next year, $50 is not going to seem like a whole lot. It's comparatively not a lot to when we first were doing 25. So we only change it once every like 30 years apparently. So maybe it'll be $50 for the next 30 years. I don't know. It is definitely, in my opinion, you know, $50 is nothing. I mean, I was, not to get on a huge tangent, but I was realizing the other day that, you know, when I was a teenager, you go to McDonald's and get a meal for it was $2.99. Now you can't even get a sandwich for that, like not even the whole meal. So it's more than double, in 30 years. So I think going from 25 to 50 across 30 years makes sense. So.
Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the rule of 72 is used by financial people to determine doubling times. And if you use that rule at 5% inflation, prices would double every 14.4 years. And if it was $25 in 2006, that's 17 years ago. So prices would have more than doubled in between 2006 and now. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move on just because there's a lot. But again, if we end up getting stuck on one for the rest of the evening, that's fine as well. Proposal C is to, pardon me, Wayne brought me dinner, which is why I turned off my video. I didn't figure you guys wanted to see me munching, but it is quite delicious. So proposal C is to clarify the definition of membership. It is to make it abundantly clear that in order to be considered a member at the floor level, there is free membership. You have to have signed the pledge. So it is to keep it. It was the feeling of the committee that is what the bylaw said anyway, but this was to make it abundantly clear because it's been asked before if that word member could be used for someone who would not sign the pledge. So we were adding the word exclusively just to clear up any potential ambiguities. There are multiple proposals having to do with membership, by the way. There's another one coming up. So one's to raise the dues, one's to make it abundantly clear that you have to have signed the pledge. Proposal D was withdrawn. Okay, proposal E, change platform deletion threshold. Right now, you could delete a plank by a majority vote, but new planks or amendments to existing planks require 2/3. A deletion is a form of amendment, so it seemed kind of odd to some of us on the committee that you could basically amend everything but like one word and it would require 2/3, but like to get rid of the whole thing would just be a majority. So we wanted to make it consistent that amendments, which a deletion is, would just all require 2/3. Mr. Madden.
So, Madam Chair, while I understand the rationale of standardizing both forward and backward, adding or subtracting, I think that it should be noted that it should always be easier to remove something that may be considered bad than to add something that may be considered bad. And I think that standardizing this both ways, both directions, will possibly lead to another Portland massacre where the platform will you'd have to have a mass deletion of planks as things get inflated over time. And I do think that may have some precedent.
Okay, I'm going to address that. If it requires 2/3 to delete, I don't think we'll ever see a Portland massacre. This is actually one of the reasons to have it standardized, that you shouldn't be able to have a mere majority get rid of the work of delegates that took 2/3 to put it in. So there's to say something should be easier to remove than to add, that's, with all due respect, that's just an assertion. That's not a rule anywhere. It's up to the body. And if something's truly bad, like the rationale for having 2/3 to add is you want something where you're assuming that the delegates are representative of the, and I know that's an assumption, but that's why we have delegations, are representative of the wider body. It needs to be in both directions something that has overwhelming support, not just over 50%.
Well, then shouldn't it be like a simple majority for those that wish to delete planks or anything that they feel is bad? Or does it also have to include 1/3 minority?
It would require 2/3 to delete if this proposal passes. Right now, it is a majority.
All right, but 2/3 of a majority versus a majority, are they the same or two different aspects here?
No, it's a 2/3 vote. It's not 2/3 of a majority. It's a 2/3 vote of the convention.
So then it's a majority.
No, it's 2/3.
Well, we could probably change that to a majority, couldn't we?
That is not what the committee is proposing, and I would oppose that vehemently. We need a stable platform. This is something to add stability. There was quite an uproar last convention. I know some people supported these deletions, but I don't think anyone can doubt that it was controversial, which was the deletion of the abortion plank. And it ended up being a compromise where certain language was stricken, but the freedom of association plank was almost stricken. I think it would have been much less controversial if it required 2/3. A majority should not be able to undo the work of 2/3, is what the committee came down upon. And there's something I see Judith speaking in text. There's something I want to clarify here that many people don't understand. A majority vote or a 2/3 vote is a majority or 2/3 of those present and voting, meaning abstentions don't count. So in theory, this is just just to impress upon people what this means. You could have a room full of 1,000 people and 997 of them abstain, and 2 out of the 3 vote yes. That's a 2/3 vote, because your denominator is those voting. Abstentions means literally not to vote. They don't count in the denominator. So if you have a convention of 1,000 people, no, it does not take 501 to pass one. You're always going to have a certain number of people who abstain. It's a majority of those voting, those present and voting, not merely those present. Same thing with the 2/3 vote. Okay, next plank, and I noticed a small little typo there, or that little underline, and that was driving me batty. I will fix that. Let me note what thing that's in. It's in proposal E. Okay, proposal F, clarify procedure on dropping candidates. Okay, Article 15, and this has come up multiple conventions. Alicia Matson had pointed out that this was a problem in our bylaws, and I think she's right. And I also think the convention has decided to ignore it. But the alternative voting procedures allows a candidate to be dropped who initially doesn't receive a majority. If you read this the way I believe is the way to read it, you can only drop candidates on the first round. However, it is our custom, and the way delegates have chosen to interpret this bylaw is on any round, but that's really not what the bylaw says. So if that's been our practice, we should conform our bylaws to how we actually do things. So it would strike the word initially receives a majority and says when no candidate receives a majority in any particular round, the candidate receiving the fewest votes is removed from further consideration. That way it keeps people from say, you know, I'm just gonna Donald Duck, I was gonna say, but you know, it has to be a real person. But anyway, let's pretend there's a real person named Donald Duck was a nominated candidate, but was dropped. They're not going to be on further rounds. They become disqualified from further rounds. So we're just clarifying what our the way we have been practicing. Mr. Maligan.
How do I add this?
So
There's
under
no
this,
barcode and there's no.
Susan.
Okay, so I'm speaking right now. You should be muted.
Okay, thank you,
Cool.
Mr. Maligan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this doesn't change the NOTA thing, right? So NOTA is still going to be an option on all of these, even if the lowest candidate is removed. It doesn't change anything, right? As far as like NOTA being on the ballot for every round moving forward.
Correct. However, we are viewing each of these bylaws in isolation because you can't assume other ones are going to pass. There are some convention rules that are going to be proposed to switch to RCV for some races. And because of that, while it happens behind the scenes because it's instant runoff, but NOTA doesn't survive in the instant runoff. Now that will be invisible to delegates, but NOTA can be dropped in a round for the RCV proposal. But if we're not doing RCV, if we're doing like we typically do, no, this does not eliminate NOTA because NOTA isn't literally a candidate.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Ms. Hogarth, I think you just had your mic on inadvertently, but if you were trying to talk, it doesn't appear so. All right, Proposal G, clarify procedure for appellate rules. That is our Judicial Committee. The way the rules written right now is the Judicial Committee has special rules of order, and they can only propose them in the first 90 days, and they can never amend them. So this is a proposal that says, because our Judicial Committee, they start to mature, even though they could do this every convention, they are 4-year terms, unlike the LNC. But it says that the Judicial Committee can establish new or propose amendments to its existing rules of appellate procedure at any time. The LNC still has kind of veto power if they're terrible. And if there's an appeal that's already pending, they can't change the rules on the people who have a pending appeal. It can't change the rules of the game. They can propose those amendments, but they won't be in effect for people who have a present appeal. Mr. Madden.
So my take here might be a smidge controversial, but I do not believe that the LNC should have veto authority over the Judicial Committee. The Judicial Committee is elected by the delegates, and they are, in essence, their own branch unto themselves of the kind of the convention body, I guess would be the best consideration. I don't believe that the LNC should have any really interaction with them other than some point of order that goes ignored or something like that should be brought to them. But within their own rule set, I think that they need to be left alone because they're their own body. So,
Mr. Bracco?
I would just comment on that. The proposal, even as is written, because I would like to note that the 2/3 veto already exists. It's not something that we're adding here. So this proposal, even if it's not changing that particular aspect of it, it is expanding the options of the JC. So I would just like to put that out there for the record.
Yeah, we're not adding that veto power that's been in there. And understand that the special rules of order of the JC are suspendable by the JC. So, not with regards to rights of people who are presenting an appeal, but to their own procedures. We could look at the appellate rules, but they are special rules of order and they adopt them so they can suspend them. This does not constrain the JC. Let the LNC have control over it. What it is doing is make sure that the JC doesn't propose anything crazy. And the existing appellate rules are the basis for the future ones. So it's not even as if the LNC can change anything that already exists, which nobody's really complained about the current appellate rules about them not being fair or anything like that. These are special rules of order. They're not bylaws. They don't ultimately affect member rights, which are codified in the bylaws. Mr. Seebeck.
Yes, being on the Judicial Committee currently, as well as Mr. Latham, we discussed this within the committee before we brought it to this committee. And the original proposal did include removing the 2/3 veto, but this committee found fit to leave it in. I agree with Mr. Madden. I don't think there should be that oversight in there because it creates a potential conflict of interest, but it is what it is, and here we are.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one, which is to standardize the committee rules. This has been a recurring problem. Oh, and I see a hard return that's not in there. I need to fix that. Proposal H is we've had different standing rules for debating and voting for bylaws and debating and voting for platform, where actually the platform committee has, I don't want to call it more rights, but they're kind of privileged over bylaws. And bylaws, I know we all love our ideology, but bylaws is actually more existentially important. And what's funny is I did a history show on this the other day, and you can tell we're an ideological party because in the early party, there were 2 days set aside for platform and like 2 hours set aside for bylaws. But, you know, this could be one reason why our bylaws need so much work. So we're equalizing the two committees. So the proposal, let's move down here, where we're not going to have Rule 4 and Rule 5, one rule for debating and voting bylaws and one rule for debating and voting platform. We're combining them, so this also simplifies our convention rules to debating and voting, bylaws and rules committee and platform committee. And it just smooths out the language. And I'm seeing what is very substantive here. Is it used to be that the recommendation was opened up for debate, and this was on the platform committee for without amendment for a period of up to 15 minutes. That's a really long time. We put that down to 10. It was shorter for bylaws, and we kind of split the difference. So what was it for bylaws before? 8 minutes. So bylaws was only given 8 minutes. Platform was given 15. We kind of split it to 10. And it goes to an immediate vote. If it fails on that vote, then it's open for amendments on the floor. Also, our convention rules provided automatically for there to be minority reports for platform, but not for bylaws. So we equalize those and have pretty much the same ground rules where both bylaws and platform have minority reports that be heard. And let's see what else. Here we removed the convention rule that says if there were proposals considered by the platform committee, but which received an unfavorable vote from a majority of the committee, if time permits, can be considered. Time has never permitted. In 50 years, time has never permitted. There's no point in having this. And the purpose of a committee is to hear the report of the majority. If there's a minority that wants to have something heard, they are fully members of the body and can move to suspend the rules and have their proposals heard. And with a notice provision where we have later on in the report, it makes it much easier for member proposals to get heard so that the committees aren't so privileged the way they are now. But there's no reason for this to be here. It's chupacabra because it never happens. Okay, next proposal, and M, if you could please unmute yourself. Next is to change the platform token deletion vote threshold. The platform tokens have been a cause of controversy for at least as long as I've been in the party, and I think probably long before that. And I think one reason for it may have gotten somewhat resolved last term, last convention, with the deletion of the abortion plank, because what was happening is that every convention, people were stacking their votes so that I think 20% of the delegates could force a vote on the abortion plank, and it usually failed spectacularly. It did not this time. But again, there's a lot of people who just want to delete this provision. To me, it's a provision worth keeping, but 20% of the delegates shouldn't be able to force a vote by stacking their tokens. So instead of issuing 5 signature tokens, which can be quite time consuming to count as well, we struck that to be that each delegate will get 3 signature tokens. And having it be 20%, we've made it has to be, the total number of tokens have to be 1/3 or more. So raise the bar on tokens. So it still allows something to come for a vote, but it's not quite as easy as it's been in the past. This system's also been abused with this low threshold. There was a caucus which only existed for that one convention, which hated the token system. And to prove the token system was broken, they were trying to organize to force a deletion vote on the omissions plank, which they weren't even opposed to. They were doing it as a stunt and were going to try to delete the omissions plank just to prove a point. We should not have our platform be able to be used to prove a point. And we shouldn't waste delegates' time to just prove a point because someone doesn't like a bylaws provision. This should be used for what it's intended for. All right, next, rising seconds. This is something that exists in a lot of states. I know California has it. A lot of time gets wasted at convention, particularly in the beginning when everyone's fresh and exuberant. And the example I like to give is, someone will get up and get a second for something like, oh, I move to resolve that Harry Potter was the greatest book of all time. And that might be a lot of fun. But when we start running out of time at the end of convention, we realize that we wasted time with this stuff. So we want to make it obvious that something that is going to be heard has more than just one person in a room willing to second it. That might work out well as an indication that something should be heard in a board, but for a large convention, there should be more than just one person raising their hand. So every 1 second here. So we added all main motions and adhering subsidiary motions, as well as motions to suspend the rule and adopt a certain proposition or take a particular action originating from the floor, require 20 delegates to second. So in a room of 1,000, if you can't get 20 people to second it, it probably shouldn't be heard. And this should cut down on the time wasting things. I know they're fun in the beginning, like wanting a cage match between the officers, which was something that actually got debated last convention. And then you saw the way poor Ken Molman was having to do the end of the convention with a bullhorn because there was just time wasting. Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, I was looking this proposal over while examining something else this morning, and I came across a question. If all made motions and adhering subsidiaries require 20 delegates to second, and we're at the very first motion to seat delegates, and we have nobody on the floor, how are you going to get that second with 20? We're going to have 20 to do it.
Okay, this gets into, first of all, motions that come out of committees are, maybe we need to clarify that this doesn't include motions coming out of committees. However, you're getting into the Schrodinger's delegate thing. Presumptive delegates can second. I mean, if that were the case that we didn't have anybody, then we couldn't even get 1 second, unless you were considering somebody on the committee, but the committee aren't delegates themselves. So it's presumptive delegates. That's why they get to vote on approving themselves, because they are presumptive delegates if there hasn't been a challenge where they're excluded on voting on themselves.
Need to clarify this then.
Well, they feel free to stick that on the list, or when we start working on the report of putting something from here. I think we could probably do an amendment to clarify that these are motions from the floor rather than motions from a committee. You just say from the floor would make it clear that we're talking about people getting up to the mic. Okay, next is the change timing of platform committee appointments. Platform gets appointed far too late. Most years, the states have until the end of December to make their appointments. There are always states who wait to the last minute. They can't meet, even though the LNC might have made its appointments 9 months before. They can't meet until the deadline for state committee appointments happen. If the convention is generally in May and you have a committee that can only start meeting in January, if they're going to have town halls or they're going to get their report out well ahead of time for delegates, there's just not enough time. So we are proposing that rather than the platform committee deadline being no later than the last day of the 5th month prior to the convention, it would be no later than 12 months before a regular convention. So it gives them a year. I've chaired the past 3 platform committees. There were some weeks we were meeting 3 times a week because of the time crunch. Proposal L is to change the delegate allocation formula. Right now, delegate allocations are voodoo between presidential vote totals and the number of sustaining party members in the state. The proposal is to take out that formula and instead say the number of delegates allocated to each affiliate shall be 1 delegate for each 0.1% or fraction thereof of the total sustaining membership. So what it does is it removes the presidential vote totals in the calculus. The rationale of the committee was that some states have terrible ballot access. Some states really don't have much control over they are prejudiced in the number of votes they can get because of state laws. And this was felt by the committee to level the playing field. Anybody can get memberships. Nathan Madden.
I just want to say that I am wholly in support of this change. I believe that the various states are currently in the process of trying to raise ballot access requirements again. And I believe that private society should not have to rely on a third party for their own rules or for their own members. So I think that this is a wonderful change, and I do also agree with the proviso, as that would affect the seated delegate as soon as it goes into effect. So I'm happy that the proviso is in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madden, and for everyone else's benefit. Bylaws amendments, if there's no proviso, go into effect the minute they're passed. And if this went into effect the minute it passed, there's an argument to be made that it would unseat people or change delegate allocations. I actually don't think it would, because the credentials report would have already been adopted, but the proviso was put in there to not have a huge fight on the floor over this. We did this proviso with any proposal that could really change the rules midstream. Also, and I see your hand, Mr. Seebeck. I will get with you right after this one comment. As alternative voting movements are gaining some steam, you'll notice that in the language that struck, this is something that was added 2 conventions ago. It says if a state conducts its presidential election via ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, the ballots for the Libertarian candidate as tabulated in the first round of ballot counting will be used for this purpose, because a whole question got raised. Presidential vote total, it's not apples to apples when you're comparing states that have ranked choice and states that have first past the post. So this would eliminate that complication, because it would really be voodoo to calculate delegate totals with that if more states adopt ranked choice. I think it's only, is it Vermont right now that has ranked choice for presidential elections, and I think it's only in certain counties. So it does simplify the formula. Mr. Seebeck.
Yeah, actually, to clarify, it's Maine, and I believe there's a message in the chat about people being in the lobby.
Oh, let me see. I haven't gotten any beep, but let me go look. No one's in the lobby.
Okay.
Double checking. Nope, nobody's in the lobby. Okay. Next, change timing of credentials committee appointments. Similarly, the time frame is too short. So it was 3 months before convention. That is super short. So we did it to make the deadline 6 months before convention. Next, limit committee alternates. Right now, states and the LNC, for their appointments to bylaws, credentials, and platform, those states don't get to appoint to bylaws, but this would apply to any committee. It says you're entitled to a certain number of appointments. Plus, Stephen, you sound like you're having a good time. It says ranked alternates may be named by the appointing bodies to fill any vacancies. It doesn't say how many. In theory, a state could appoint 50 alternates, even though they only get 1 seat. And the custom is that alternates get to debate freely in committees. So debate sometimes is just as important as a vote. And particularly since you can't call the question on committees. Now, of course, the committee could decide that alternates can't debate. That is something that they can do. If the primary is there, generally we have not done that. So this is to make it clear that the point of an alternate is to fill the spot of a primary. So we are suggesting limiting it. Each appointing body may appoint ranked alternates up to the number of its primary appointments. And states can always, like, say they lose their alternate or they lose their primary, their alternate moves up, they can appoint a new alternate. So it isn't like states need to appoint 5 alternates so they have a bunch of spares because they're not able to fill those later. They can. Okay, next. Add notice requirements. Okay, we got up, I think, to maybe not to this limit, but now we're definitely into new material. Right now, our bylaws and platform don't have any notice requirements. So it really does not protect the membership from an actual takeover. We're not using the rhetoric of last convention. You know, a caucus dominating a convention is not a takeover. When I say takeover, I mean literal hostile people from other parties. We've been a juicy plum for the Republican Party for a while. When I first joined the party, and I wish I kept this document, I didn't realize the significance of it. And I'm sure somebody still has it. There was an opposition research paper that somebody got a hold of from some Republican operatives that were gauging the takeover ability of all third parties. And one thing that makes us weak in one respect is that our bylaws do not require any notice. So this is to fix that. Roberts does recommend that bylaws should not be able to be amended without prior notice. But another thing we have is that the committees are privileged. We didn't want to add notice and foreclose the possibility of proposals from the floor entirely. So, and I do see your hand, Mr. Madden, but I wanted to just finish explaining it and then I will call upon you. So under amendment, we added amendment and notice. So this requires the platform committee and the bylaws committee to provide their reports well ahead of time, 35 days prior to the regular convention. That will be noticed out of the committees. Right now, we're not required to provide our reports ahead of time. It's kind of been our custom and we try to, but there's really no requirement that we provide a report at all to the membership. So this would solidify that along with the minority reports and how they get published. But we also put in a provision where sustaining members can get their proposals heard without suspending the rules. It would be on the agenda. However, they have to submit these proposals within 60 days of the convention. So the party platform and these bylaws then will be able to be amended by the delegates at any regular convention, A, by a 2/3 vote with prior notice. So that would include member proposals and the committee. B, by a 3/4 vote without prior notice. So if some big hole in our bylaws was found, it wouldn't foreclose the possibility of a no notice provision, but it would have to be something very existential because it would require such a high vote threshold of 3/4. And it exempts out the platform deletion token process. The whole point of that is not to have notice. So Mr. Madden first and then Mr. Maligan.
Please allow Mr. Maligan to go first.
Okay, Mr. Maligan.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. Thank you, Madam Chair. What's the tradition now? So it's not codified now. When it's released ahead of time, what is it traditionally?
There isn't one really.
Or what has it been in the past, I guess, is what I would ask. Like, I guess based off last convention.
The platform committee had its report out 3 weeks ahead of time, I think. The bylaws committee was still working on its proposals the evening of. Dr. Moulton and I were up till 2 in the morning. I wasn't on the committee, but I was trying to negotiate with the committee on behalf of the Mises caucus. Because there were some proposals that just were not going to pass, and we were trying to help them massage them to something that could actually pass.
Is there? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mr. Maligan.
Well, I was just going to say, is there a way to make it? I mean, I don't know. I do know on some level because of here in California, but I'm assuming this is on a much grander scale. Is there a way to make it or to propose a higher threshold instead of 35 days? Because I still, if memory serves, there were people that were still upset that they hadn't gotten enough time. And I would suspect that at 35 days, people would still say that it wasn't enough time for them to review everything. I mean, would it be amenable to say something closer to, I don't know, like 50 days or 60 days, or is that cutting it way too close given the scope of the time frame?
Well, right now we have no notice. So we don't want to go from 0 to a huge time frame. Plus, we can't presume that the expanding window of time for the platform committee will pass. So you're dealing with the platform committee that right now only has to be appointed 5 months before the convention.
So this would only my thing would only make sense if the platform one passed where they met earlier and they had more than enough time to put something together. But even then, going from 0 to 60, like you said, is a bit of a leap given that there's nothing there.
Well, plus the two timeframes work together. So we have the 35 days and the 60 days for the member proposals. And the reason for that is we want the committee to be able to look at the member proposals and perhaps adopt them if they like them, thus putting them higher on the agenda. And also, if it's a good idea, but worded really badly, because that's what kills organizations. Proposals from the floor, for instance, our worst bylaws are ones that are proposed from the floor. So this gives the committee, who, at least with bylaws, is supposedly elected because of their unique qualifications, their skill, experience, perhaps there's parliamentarians. So we also want to give lead time for the committees to be able to see these proposals and perhaps massage them to offer one of their own that's worded better, but still accomplishes the same thing. So if you put out the committee reports to 50, 60 days, then member proposals would have to be 70, 75. And a lot of times people aren't even thinking about convention that far ahead of time. And they might not want to propose something unless they know if they're going to be a delegate. And state conventions sometimes are 2 months prior to convention. So the 35 days is there's only 1 or 2 conventions that select their delegates in that last month prior to convention. Last term, there was only 1 convention that did that. So the first 35 days gives enough time for 49 of the state's delegates to be able to review it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Madden. You're on mute.
Was that a call for me, Madam Chair?
Yeah, yes, it was.
Okay. I just want to, with the chair's permission, I would like to ask this question of the registered parliamentarians in the room. Does this amendment protect member rights to an acceptable extent?
I don't know who's the registered parliamentarians, or either RPs or PRP. I know Mr. Jacobs is here, and I have no problem having him be heard. I'm a registered parliamentarian. I wrote the proposal. So I obviously think it does. I think we've had zero protection. So my intent in writing this is to protect the party and to protect the member rights. Mr. Jacobs, do you have any thoughts on this? I think you were at the meeting when we were hammering this out.
Madam Chair, I don't recall if I'm at the meeting, but I'd rather give my turn at least first, since there is another registered parliamentarian in the room, to Ms. Arrowwood.
Ms. Arrowwood, do you have an opinion on this? Ms. Arrowwood, you're probably on mute because you're not cussing. You only unmute yourself when you're cursing at the committee.
Right. I think it's offering sufficient protection to those that it should be.
Thank you, Ms. Arrowwood. Are there any other registered parliamentarians other than what Sylvia, by the way, is a PRP, so is JJ, but are there any others in the room?
I identify as one. Does that count? That's the thing now, right?
We don't recognize that, but good try, Mr. Milligan. Okay, Mr. Jacobs, and then we'll go to Mr. Mullman.
Madam Chairman, yes, I feel that this is something that does protect the rights of absentees in particular, and that it is helpful. I think that this has become incredibly important. It keeps people from trying to sneak things in. And I think it's very, very useful to have.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Madden, did that satisfy your inquiry?
That it did, Madam Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Mullman.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on, while I'm not a registered parliamentarian, we went through a quite an ordeal in Kentucky, gosh, 5-6 years ago. the main things that I like about this is that it provides adequate notice to every single person. There's not an excuse that anyone will have to say, oh, I didn't have time to read that. You got a month. Come on, man. You had a month to read it if you cared. And at the same time, doesn't block people from bringing stuff from the floor if there's something that the committee just will not consider that actually has widespread support, that has the capability of coming from the floor. But, obviously the goal of a committee is to avoid floor amendments, avoid floor proposals when at all possible. So it's pushing things the right direction, but also having the accountability and check and balance for the members to be able to go around a committee that might otherwise block something that they want. So I think personally.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Molman. Okay, just a little bit of an addendum. I think this is one of our more important proposals. Not having notice is crazy pants. Okay. Oh, and we didn't go over the order of business. I alluded to it. It adds to the agenda member proposals that were given with notice. So this now doesn't privilege the committee so much, and members aren't prejudiced by the notice requirement. If they comply with notice, their proposals get on the agenda rather than having to suspend the rules. And that will also, ironically, in adding things to the agenda will save time because people won't be trying 20 times to suspend the rules for something that they came up with in, over the bar the night before. And then there's a corresponding rule that just says how it's handled for debating and voting. Okay. There is an alternate amendment language here. Just to explain what this is, because we have a proposal to change the platform threshold to 2/3, which this is another reason to do it, to make the notice requirement smooth. So we don't have all kinds of weird contingencies where some votes are a majority and some votes are 2/3. However, recognizing that 2/3 might not pass for the platform, we have alternative amendment language. And also we noted that any changes to amendment thresholds, token processes, or notice shall take effect upon final adjournment. So it won't torpedo things going on at convention. Proposal P, balloting rules rewrite. Okay, this, one second, let me go look. It's been a while since I've looked at this. All right, there's no real substantive change here. It's just that our convention rules were, you could tell they were cobbled together. It kind of happens with rules and bylaws over the years where amendments are done by different authors and different people, and they kind of accrete onto the ship like barnacles. And that's what happened with our convention rules. So just the rationale in this was that the balloting rules are all over the place and there's no consistent procedure in writing on how the secretary, vote tellers, and delegation chairs are actually supposed to do this. We've relied more upon, oh, this is our custom, or this is our oral tradition. So also, we have two rules: polling procedure, one second here, let's go, and election balloting procedure, when those two should be combined. So we just combine them into one rule that clarifies all the various procedures and codifies how we actually do this. Okay, and it's just striking all the language from the various places it was in and moving it all into one rule. Next, add electronic balloting. This is something that's been tried multiple times. A lot of people want it, but apparently not enough to have it pass in the past. So we're hoping that this proposal will pass, unlike doomed electronic balloting proposals in the past. So it's very modest. And if it works, this can be amended again in the future. So the problem with electronic balloting, as far as libertarian delegates are concerned, is they don't trust it. So what we have is to amend the agenda to have a convention vote to authorize electronic voting, but there's certain caveats for that. So the delegation would construct its vote electronically or by written ballot. If it's by written ballot, there's the procedure. But if approved by convention, electronic balloting may be used instead of manual tabulation by affiliate delegation, provided that written notice of the electronic balloting system to be used is published on the party website at least 90 days prior to the regular convention. So one problem that we've had is the lack of trust in the system. There's a balloting program written by somebody that's within the party. There's been people, without going into the merits or not merits, I'm agnostic on that, but people have said, particularly because it was a person who was a member of the LNC last time, we don't want someone on the LNC writing our electronic balloting program. Where can they go in the back door and change things? So we don't want the delegates to be surprised with whatever system is adopted, whether it's something written by a party member, whether it's an outside vendor. So when they're voting to authorize electronic balloting, notice of what system would be used, it has to be published on the party website at least 90 days ahead of time. So it's something that's vetted, that delegates will have time to look for the problems with leading up to convention. Also clarifying that a delegate has to be physically present to cast an electronic ballot, because part of the concerns were that people could vote from their rooms. And the electronic balloting system has some minimal requirements. Each delegate has the ability to cast an electronic ballot that produces a conforming physical ballot so they can check it. Or if it doesn't have that, because, you know, how many printers are we going to have? Or a vote by an electronic ballot would be accompanied by the delegate's contemporaneous completion of a conforming physical ballot. So what it's saying is that you would cast your electronic vote, but you would also fill out a paper ballot. And there's a reason for that. The physical ballot, either the printout or your contemporaneous completion, is delivered to your delegation chair, just like physical ballots would be due now. They're not counted. They're placed into a sealed envelope. They will only be counted if a recount is successfully ordered. Ordering a recount on an electronic ballot is just asking the computer to do what it already did. And if people don't trust the system, there's no way to meaningfully audit it at convention. So this generation of a physical ballot gives something that can actually be recounted. And the electronic system also will require a report by affiliate delegation for display to the convention, because that's how people know whether they want to order a recount, as they look and they go, no, my state's totals are wacky. I mean, we have that with the physical ballot, where particularly in a small delegation, like, 8 people, and then it says 7 of them voted for somebody that, the people sitting next to you, and unless they're lying to you, that's not the way the vote went. And the tellers have manually recounted that. I could tell you in 2020, the way the delegation tally sheets were, there was my name and then a dark horse name for secretary. And there was one state that had a huge number of votes for the dark horse candidate, which they knew wasn't correct. And that was ordered a recount. So they still got to be able to look at their totals by affiliate delegation. The system needs to allow delegates to cast write-in votes, because that is required by Roberts, unless your bylaws, not your rules, your bylaws specifically disallow it. I would like to see a bylaws amendment to disallow write-ins. I hate them, but this isn't what the committee chose. Mr. Madden.
Yes, Madam Chair. My only concern with the language here presented echoes the concerns of some of the committee members as I was observing that meeting, and that is the contemporaneous physical ballot that is filled out manually by the delegate can be intentionally different from their electronic ballot, and there is no guarantee that you could have a single conforming ballot for both electronic and physical only in that instance. In all of the other instances which this amendment covers, you have conforming ballots, but with barring that one, you do not have a guarantee.
And for the town hall's benefit, yes, this was discussed in the meeting. There is no motivation because people do not know how the rest of the convention is going to vote for single delegates to put something different down. And it's not going to happen in any large enough number in the vast majority of circumstances to make any kind of difference, and a recount has to be successfully ordered. There is no such thing as perfection. Like we talked on the committee about that, what was it? I forgot whether it's a solar flare or whatever, that in electronic balloting can flip votes, that it happened, I think it was in Denmark, where like this candidate, like the votes were multiplied by some weird digit. But even in a computer circuit, there's no guarantee that everything is going to be identical. The idea of rules and systems is to minimize that as much as possible, but people are going to people. And that's, in order to have a system that people could trust, that's what needs to happen. Because here's, or at least that's what the committee decided, because here's the problem. What if they vote to allow electronic voting, but the printers fail, or there's a glitch in the program where it won't spit out a ballot? This gives a backup procedure where there's another method to continue with electronic voting. We could come up with a million scenarios, but we have to propose something, considering this has failed multiple times before, that we think will cover the concerns of the delegates. Is it going to be perfect? No. But we have to instill some kind of trust in an electronic system, and perhaps in the future, all of these provisions can get deleted. But we need to get this in the door. And if we're going to allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good, we're just not going to have electronic balloting. Okay. I think we spent 4 meetings on that proposal, if I remember correctly, which is over 8 hours. That was fun. Was that proposal P? Because which one was P? Because P was the nightmare.
That one.
It was, yeah. We were like, one does not simply move proposal P.
There was it was 1 on the rules, and then at least 2.5 on this thing.
Yeah. Okay, proposal Q, protect the preamble. This hasn't been an issue the past couple conventions, but it has been within my time on the party. Is now, if one second, I want to look at the proposal. It's been argued that the preamble isn't part of the platform, and therefore it can be amended by a majority rather than a 2/3 that would be required to amend the rest of the platform. So it's to make it clear that the party platform, because we've had a preamble now in the platform for I don't think there was one originally. Originally, the statement of principles was called the preamble, but I think the preamble got put into the platform in 76. It was in the 70s. So we've had a preamble in our platform for almost 50 years. So the party platform has a preamble. I can tell you the year where the argument was made that the preamble wasn't part of the platform and therefore it could be amended by a 50% vote. And if you haven't read the preamble, I would highly suggest you read it. It's actually a quite beautiful piece of writing. It really is. I view it as quite poetic. So we do want to protect it, but I can tell you the convention in which it was argued that it could be amended by 50%. This is what the amendment was: to strike the entire preamble and replace it with, we want to keep the Republicans out of your wallet and the Democrats out of your bedroom. In other words, to strike a very beautifully written exposition of our philosophy and replace it with a bumper sticker. And we shouldn't be able to do that with just a majority vote. If that's what 2/3 of people want to do, that would be a shame. But something that's been pretty stable for over 40 years should require the same threshold as something that just got put in the platform 2 conventions ago. Okay, next, add RCV voting for officers. This is what I alluded to before. It's pretty simple, just rules for RCV. I'm not going to read them aloud. The things that were judgment calls are whether we were going to use backward or forward tie breaking. Mr. Latham, what did we end up with? I always forget which one is which.
Oh, you mean forward or backward tie breaking?
Yeah.
I believe we went forward tie breaking.
Yeah, I think we did. Okay. Well, we will append to our report an explanation of those 2 things, and it will be educational for the delegates. And I don't think we put that in the rationale, but I do think we need to explain that. And the purpose of it, obviously, is we support alternative voting methods. So this would be putting our principles into place. But more importantly, particularly if we have electronic voting, though RCV can be done with hand counting, we don't have these multiple rounds like what happened in Reno. Was it 6 rounds for vice chair? But that isn't the only convention that there's been multiple rounds for a particular race, and it costs a great deal of time. So this would be a one and done. Okay, again, this would not go into effect. This convention, we're not set up to do RCV. Okay, next, refine dues definition. So here's the other proposal to membership. I told you we had 3. And Ken, I'm sure, might want to speak to this. Our way we calculate dues is a nightmare. I'm going to give you a scenario. Say somebody donates $5 a month, starting in a January of any year. The minute they give their May donation, their cumulative for the past 12 months, and it's not a calendar year, it's the past 12 months, will will have reached a total of $25. So beginning at their May payment, they've just become a sustaining member. When does their sustaining membership expire? You would think a year later in the following May, but that's not correct. By the way our bylaws are currently worded, it would expire, say they never gave any more money after that May payment, their membership would expire in January when that initial $5 drops off the past 12 months. This is a nightmare for keeping track of members, and it has thrown a severe monkey wrench in the CRM, and it just makes it super complicated. So we would like to simplify this, and staff had requested this. Instead of it saying during the prior 12 months have donated or have donated on their behalf an amount of at least $25. Now remember, this will be $50 if that dues thing changes, but we have to amend the bylaws as they exist, not how they might get amended. To change it to have paid or have paid on their behalf dues of $25 in a single payment. We've done this in Colorado as well, that we don't have to keep track of these micropayments. Dues is a dedicated payment. You don't have to wonder, does a donation, what counts? This is a single payment that's dues within the past 365 days, because then we don't also go, what's meant by 12 months? Are we doing like Jesus in the tomb, where a portion of a day in a night constitutes an entire day and night? Does one day out of the 12 months make a whole month? Is it more than half of a month? Making it 365 days at least narrows it down to a day. Yes, you could go down to the second. We're not going to do that. 365 days. Mr. Molman.
Yeah, hi. I guess I missed the meeting where we added the single payment thing, but yeah, the main problem is that we had this dueling thing with membership, which is also alluding back to the previous bylaw amendment or proposal, where there's only one definition of membership, where the office had their own member list that had nothing to do with the bylaws, and that was extraordinarily confusing. And they would give credit for, you know, oh, you've donated X, well, we'll give you credit for 16 months, or they did all kinds of weird stuff with all that stuff. And it was all about, you know, if they considered you an active member versus a BSM, and that's all gone now, thankfully. You know, the office differentiation is gone, and to the credit of the current LNC, that was done there, right? And that was good. Now there's no confusion. A member is a member, and there's no two different types of membership crap anymore. You know, as far as the rest, I don't know, but that was the real crux of the core issue, is that we had the membership, and one meant something for the bylaws, and one meant something for whether or not you got a copy of LP News. There should be no differentiation at all. You're a member or you're not a member, the end. And so how that gets resolved is whatever, but yeah, and specifying 365 days specifically, that was another loophole where if I paid on January 1st, 12 months later is technically January 31st, right. You know, do I get a free month every year? Can I just keep doing 13-month re-ups instead of 12 months and, you know, every 12 years get a free year, right? I don't know. But the point is that, you know, it needs to be very clear and defined. And 365 days is clear. Yes, there are leap years. Who cares? Okay, you get a free day every year, every 4 years. Congratulations. Except when you don't. But or you lose a day, whatever. It's a day. But that makes it easy to calculate. 365 done. So.
And the single payment thing was the same meeting, Ken, but it, you know, our meetings can sometimes get really tedious. So
yeah,
wouldn't surprise me if a bunch of people zoned out. That was requested by staff. That it wasn't just the weird definitions, which is what you originally brought to us. It was the rolling payment thing, because if we don't do the single payment thing, you still have where somebody hits the $25, becomes a member by $5 a month payments, but their membership doesn't last a full year, because if they don't pay any more, it will expire when the first $5 drops off. So they wanted it as a single payment. So when you become a member, you're a member for a year.
Right. All right. I get it. I'm more in favor of the former, but it doesn't matter. This is what we can pass. So either way will work. So
I'd like to, if I can, I see you, Ms. Hogarth. I'll call upon you in one moment. I want to show you guys something that Colorado did, that, and Colorado's bylaw is a little bit more specific, and I might even ask the committee to consider this if they like what Colorado did, but let me pull this up. Colorado had it not only as a single payment, but as a single payment that was designated for dues. So you don't start getting into questions as to do contests count, do store purchases count, do convention things count. that it has to be a designated dues payment. So, because Colorado's bylaws were changed to say that, but I want to show you the way their website looks.
Madam Chair, while you're looking that up, may I note how Kentucky does the same kind of thing?
Sure.
In Kentucky, we have it that it's a donation not specifically allocated to any project or something like that. There's some wording that basically says if it goes in, basically what it works down to is if it goes into the general fund, it's dues. If it's for a specific project or you bought something or whatever, it's not dues. And that's how we broke it down in Kentucky, because you lose the flexibility when you, right? If you even the things like ballot access, right, which I'm in favor of, now the LNC doesn't have a choice but to spend it on ballot access, technically.
If we're just killing time while you're looking for something,
I
I could have made my point as well.
Well,
Okay.
Go ahead. Have it up. This is what Colorado says. So if you go to the donate page, you'll notice it says
I'm sorry, point of
donations.
personal privilege. Could you just zoom in a little bit or make it a little
sure.
bit bigger?
Maybe. Okay. So it says donations made through this page do not count towards LPCO sustaining membership. To join or renew, click here. So it gives you a separate page if you want to become a member. And I'm clicking on that. And so this page isn't a donate page, it's LPCO annual membership, and it quotes the bylaws. And it's a specific type of donation to make it easier for us to track members, and makes it very clear that a dues payment is a dues payment. Okay, so Ms. Hogarth.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I have a lot of sympathy for this position, both in terms of bookkeeping and in terms of the clarity of this is a member donorship or not. But I feel like there's a lot of casual, that's not the right word. There are a lot of members for whom we would be leaving a lot of money on the table for this. Yes, I realize it's a headache, but there are people who do $5 a month. That's $60 a year. If I guess just having them do once a year is fine, but if it's 25, that's a big difference. And if they're doing $10 a month, they're not necessarily going to want to do $25 or $50 separately. A lot of us would, but so I feel like we're going to be leaving a lot on the table. You might have a person now who's happily doing $10 a month, and when you say dues are now $50 a year and you have to pay them separately from your pledge, then they're going to stop pledging and just give you $50, and you'll leave the difference, which is $60, on the table. So I feel like it would hurt donations, pledges. Anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Hogarth. That is certainly a consideration. I would hope that the LNC, if this were to pass, would come up with different benefits for people who are pledgers. And this would encourage them to do that. And then people would want to pledge because they're getting something more than a membership. However, Mr. Malagon can attest to this. If anyone here's from Florida, they can attest to it. Indiana can attest to it. I'm sure there's several other states. We're scrambling right now still to fix the counts. The drop in membership is nowhere near as great as it looks. There is probably 500 people who aren't accounted for because of the feedback loop that gets generated by CiviCRM because of this rolling time period. Because what is happening in these micropayments that add up, the pledges are getting erased. It's a software issue where all of a sudden it unchecks them and it says they didn't sign the pledge. There was an audit where Ms. Houston had found some memberships that weren't accounted for, but the state chairs have found more. I'm going to skip ahead just to Mr. Malagon, just because he can speak to this a little bit about missing members in California. Florida has reported over 100, maybe more. Indiana has reported about 200. This is a big problem. We got to know, we got to have something that will work with our computer system. Mr. Malagon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, that is correct. California is just under 100, and those are just the ones that I know about. I'm sure we're probably shy about 30 or 40. I do agree with Ms. Hogarth, though. This is the fact that Civi CRM is so incapable of doing this and registering that it's a software issue. It's not a member issue, and I think that we do need to keep sustaining membership. I think that while staff is pushing for this, I think this is a bad call. We want to encourage sustaining membership, and then it's a really easy fix to get someone to fix their credit card or whatever if they just stop donating $5 a month, as opposed to getting them to do the $25 or the one single payment or whatever. Those will roll in periodically, but we want to continue the sustaining membership. We don't want to lose revenue this way. So while yes, your point is well taken, and I've put 80+ hours into this as California chair, trying to figure this out and trying to do all this, I do think
if I can interrupt,
you cannot interrupt.
I will call upon
speaking.
you when Mr. Malagon is done, please. Thank you.
Oh, I had a terminological
really,
question from what he was saying.
Really,
you'll be able to
I'm
ask
still
him.
speaking. Yeah.
Go ahead,
so
Mr. Malagon.
I think thank you, Madam Chair. So I think it's still really important to acknowledge the difference between once this is solved on the software side and Civi being the crux of this, then this shouldn't really be an issue. But I understand why staff wants this now, because they think it'll fix the problem. But there's no real guarantee of that, as I'm seeing. There's just anomalies all over the place in how things are not being counted in the system as it is now. And I don't want to lose revenue, sustaining revenue, as a result of something that is seen to be as the quick fix, I guess I'll say. But I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malagon. I believe Ms. Hogarth had a clarifying terminology question for you. Go ahead, Ms. Hogarth.
Yeah, you were using the word sustaining, and I think you meant pledging. So someone who does give $25 a year, just $25 in one payment, and then that's it, he's a sustaining member. But I think you're talking about pledging members, and I think you were using sustaining maybe in a less formal sense, like they are sustaining the party by giving us money and that kind of thing. And I get that, but
I thought that the context within the monthly thing that I was talking about would suffice, but autism is real. So yes, I meant monthly donation.
Okay.
However we want to classify that.
Wait.
Yeah.
Everyone, I'm going to ask that we please not interrupt if someone has a point.
Okay, I'm going to ask that I please not be called autistic.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily an insult as an autistic person, but okay. Mr. Madden and then Mr. Molman.
Yes, I think that there's a solution here, even within the CRM, because we should count the membership after the cumulative amount has been reached, rather than when the first payment was made. And I believe that that's entirely doable on the back end side. I believe Mr. Molman may be able to back me up here. But once the payment has been fulfilled, then you receive the benefits of membership. That shouldn't be controversial. That's how every transaction is made. So I just think that that's within the scope of capability, more than within, actually. I believe that the single payment language in this proposal really does do, as Ms. Hogarth had said, it leaves a lot of money on the table for people who otherwise would have just like, oh, here's my credit card, just take however much out per month. It'll pay off the amount per year and then some, So I think that there's a solution here without the staff add. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. I had Mr. Molman, and I don't know if Mr. Malagon's hand is a artifact, but go ahead, Mr. Molman.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the
annual payment stuff has nothing to do with the pledge flag problem. The pledge flag problem is actually an issue when accounts get merged. It's a result of the manual merging that occurred for the last 8 months. And on the upside, we have backups and copies of the database. So all that's going to get back in. I'm working on that right now, actually, now that I've come back to life a little bit. But it is definitely not, the donation issue is not tied to the pledge flag issue. The pledge flag is specifically because people are merging contacts manually and don't have permission to set that flag, because you don't want to have people with the ability to just go around and mark people with membership flags. And that's why that is happening. So the upside, like I said, is that that's all going to get fixed. So if that was the impetus for the single payment.
No, it was part of it, just FYI.
Okay. I'm just making sure, because that's a bug. And it is actually fixed in the software patch that came out in March or so. It just hasn't been applied. So the point, I guess, is that that should not be the reason to pass this, because, yeah, as Mr. Maligan correctly said, a software bug is not a reason to pass a bylaw. So just, yeah. Anyway, that's that. So
let me clarify, because I think everyone seized on that, and that was something that the reason why records had to be merged was when people restarted a pledge and say their last name changed or whatever, and it created 2 records. So yes, it is a result of the merge, but what was creating the need for a merge was this need to track monthly payments as counting towards sustaining. But that's not the primary motivation, because we could come up with something to fix that. The primary,
the merge, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the primary motivation was you have somebody in the January through May example I gave that hits the sustaining member, but they're really only a member for math is hard, 7 months, because the minute their January payment drops off, they're no longer a sustaining member. So we have 7-month memberships. It's the rolling amount. That is the main impetus.
Okay.
Mr. Maligan.
I have a question for you, Madam Chair, and then I have a question for Mr. Molman, if that's appropriate.
Certainly.
So just to make sure I understand, when we're talking about the 7-month thing, for just the example that you just gave, it's the date is from the first day as it stands now that the payment was made, all right? Not when the $25 was last achieved. So it wouldn't be counting backward from December to, whatever, July or whatever. It would be from May to whenever. Is that correct? Or did I make sense?
Because the way it's worded is during the prior 12 months, have donated on their behalf an amount of at least $25. So in my example of they paid $5 January 1st, and then the first of each month through May 1st, all of a sudden their cumulative total within the past 12 months has become $25. But they have to continuously maintain that cumulative of $25. Say they don't give any more money after May. When January 2nd hits, or in theory, the end of January because of that whole month issue, but let's just pretend like it was even still days. When that first $5 payment drops off, all of a sudden they haven't donated $25 in the past 12 months, only $20. So their membership will expire in January rather than what they're probably thinking in May.
I see. Okay. And then may I ask my question to Mr. Molman?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Molman, just to be clear, the manual issue, or the issue was that manual changes were made, and that's what kind of disrupted the flow of the CRM in that case. So had those manual changes not been made, everything would have gone on as it should have?
Essentially, what really needed to happen was a more thorough merging process. So looking at which record had the pledge flag. If you merge into a record with the pledge flag, it's fine. The issue is that you're not allowed to set the merge flag. So if you merge from someone that has the pledge flag set into a record that doesn't have the pledge flag set, that person doesn't have permission to set that flag. And so the flag gets lost in the merge. In theory, that pledge is still out there in the deleted contact record, though I have not found that yet. I just haven't looked into it, but I do have copies of the database from multiple months because we keep lots and lots of backups. So I'll be able to go retrieve all those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. Okay, moving along, just to keep, oh, that was the last one. So, if there's any further discussion on any of these that are already proposed, the committee's got about 12 more proposals, I think, to consider. So there are things that are in the hopper that we haven't passed out of committee yet, but we can go back to any of these if anyone would like to, or the floor is open if you'd like to inquire if something is being considered, or you've got something that we haven't even considered that you want to propose. So we have about 15 minutes left, 15 to 20 minutes left in this meeting. So this is just open floor. You can talk about this, whatever we've already discussed, or new things. Mr. Madden.
Yes, I just want to bring forward something for the committee's consideration. And I'm not sure if this would require a bylaws amendment or it could be put into the policy manual, but multi-year memberships, if we had conditions that to track $25 or $50 as it may be, then we should also have measures to track double that. I think that would be intriguing to a lot of members. I think that having that as an option would be very valuable to the LNC and the organization as a whole.
And let me just answer your procedural question. If you look at the bylaw right above it, the National Committee may create other levels of membership and shall determine the contribution or dues level for those levels of membership. So as long as they've signed the pledge where the word member can be applied to them, that's how life memberships are created. Notice they're not in the bylaws. That's a LNC creation. However, in order to be a sustaining member and count towards delegate allocations, you have to have given $25 in the past 12 months. But the LNC can create other levels of membership that have different kinds of benefits, including people who give $5 a month. You know, this, making it a single payment, in my opinion, and I understand people have strong opinions either way, and I think there are great arguments on both sides of this, is going to incentivize the LNC to get more creative in things that they can offer for fundraising. So I think the single payment thing is still a good idea, and I don't think we'll leave money on the table if you have a motivated LNC. Because Mr. Latham hasn't spoke yet, let me call upon him, then Mr. Maligan.
Yeah, just following up on Mr. Madden's proposal, I think there's really some potential there, and just I would encourage, Madam Chair, maybe you get that back to the LNC, because I guess we don't need to amend the bylaws to do that, but I'm thinking something like a 2-year membership. We could call it a convention membership, or, you know, a presidential membership. So 4 years. You know, then people aren't having to renew as often, and the staff isn't having to process that as often. So I think there's some potential there.
Point of information.
But I'd like to hear maybe why that's not a good idea.
Okay. Well, point of information is not interruptible, Dr. Moulton. So is it something that you have to have answered now in order to meaningfully participate, or can you get in line?
I just want to correct you because you gave an inaccurate statement.
I think I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
The life members is,
I know,
in the bot where you have the ... That's
Yeah.
where it is.
Yeah, you're correct. I forgot about that. But the amount of life membership is set by the LNC. That's more precisely what I should have said. The dollar amount of life membership's not in the bylaws. Mr. Maligan, then Mr. Madden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree about the membership thing. There are good people on both sides. I do agree about that. To paraphrase you, if we could, I have a question about the platform committee really quickly. I just want to make sure I understand. As it stands now, nothing can happen with the platform committee. So until January, they can't meet even informally. It doesn't matter if anyone is selected as it stands now. And I apologies, I don't know. I'm trying to scroll and find the actual proposal. But as it stands now, nothing can happen in regards to the platform. They can't meet. You can't have any participation until January because that's how it's stated.
Okay, the way you're using informally, you're not really using it in the Roberts ways, but nothing is stopping people who know they're appointed from a committee from getting together in a Zoom meeting and talking. But it's not the platform committee. It's just
so the
people,
committee itself.
right?
Right. So the committee itself. Even so, just to make sure, because the clause as it stands says no later than the 5th month, but it doesn't say anything about sooner. So technically, couldn't it be that if everyone was selected come, let's say
Yes.
October 1st, just for then, so if everyone is selected, then they could formally, it would begin.
Yep.
Is that correct?
But it never happens.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
And I could tell you this year it won't happen because one of the states, and now maybe they'll spring to life and surprise me, but let's just take the situation today as a given that it's going to continue through the end of the year. One of the states entitled to platform committee appointments is Wyoming. Wyoming has gone radio silent for about 2 years now. They didn't even send delegates to Reno. So they're not going to appoint. They're not going to appoint at all. We're not going to get an appointment from them, but we got to give them till the end of December to do so because they're entitled to. Now, maybe they'll spring to life tomorrow and I'll get their platform committee appointment. But considering that the website says insert bylaws here, I don't have. It does. Go look up the Wyoming bylaws. It says insert bylaws here. And I'm like,
no, I'm laughing because it's giving you an opportunity to insert the bylaws wherever and whenever you want. You're choosing not to.
You go and look at the Wyoming, goes insert your bylaws here. I go, I feel personally attacked by that page. So maybe they will appoint.
It's an invitation.
I would hope so, but realistically, they probably are just going to December 31st going to come and go, and the platform committee is going to be 19 members rather than 20.
Makes sense.
Excuse me. Because Ms. Reuter hasn't spoken before, I'm going to call upon her first and then Mr. Madden.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to check in because there was one I was especially intrigued with, and it apparently has not come up this evening. And
which is that, Ms. Reuter?
I'm sorry?
Which one is that, Ms. Reuter?
It has to do with restructuring the LNC.
Yeah, the committee hasn't heard that proposal yet. It is on the docket for a future meeting.
Okay. And so I asked in the chat and nobody was quite sure whether there would or wouldn't for sure be a town hall during which that could be brought up between now and the convention. I just want to make sure there is, because I love this party. I love the people in it. I am so determined to get us freedom. I want it in my lifetime, but at least to my sons. And one of the things that I think that will make a big difference is the functionality of the Libertarian National Committee. So I want to make sure I'm in on that. That's all.
Well, first of all, let me try to answer your question. I'm going to do some speculating here, and I can be proven entirely wrong, but the purpose of the town hall is to have candid discussions with the membership. If you ask me with my crystal ball, and I'm not trying to influence a vote at all, I just know talking with committee members, I don't think that proposal is going to pass out of committee. I can tell you, I personally, if it comes down to a tie or break a tie, I will be voting against it. Now, maybe it will pass. There are some other proposals. And I've heard word of members trying to bring one from the floor. So who knows? It could still be moved from the floor. Our bylaws need a lot of work. I'm not terribly crazy about such a big change when there are other more existential changes, but the committee can feel differently. However, let's say it does pass. there will be a town hall after it. I hope to have 1 or 2 more town halls, but there will definitely be a town hall on the entire report, at least as far as we can tell. The committee has a right to continue to make proposals up through I get up to present the report. I am highly encouraging the committee to be absolutely done with its report the end of January, but I can't require that. I can only guide as the chair. So whatever gets passed out of the committee, if that proposal passes or another restructuring proposal gets passed, it will be part of a town hall next year. I can tell you we're also planning on doing, this is kind of up in the air because this has never been done before, but it's something I promised to at least try to get done when I ran for committee chair, is as we get much closer to convention, I want to hold a mock convention of presumptive delegates in which we present the bylaws committee report and have mock votes on it. So we could see how a room full of people who would care to come to such a thing, or people who care about bylaws, how they would actually vote if we were pretending like we were having the convention. So I think that'll be very helpful to the committee to refine their proposals, to have live interaction with presumptive delegates, and I'll realize which of arguments that I'll be making as committee chair, or the rationales, which ones fall flat and which ones are winners. And it will allow me to present better. So there will be at least 1 more town hall, potentially 2, and hopefully a mock convention.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Mr. Madden?
For purposes of extension, are all attendees able to make the motion?
No. The committee would need to, but this isn't even like really officially a committee meeting. I'm willing to keep the room open since there's still hands for like another 15 minutes, but this is the party account that I have to be here to open. I get up for work at 4:30 in the morning and I have a 2-hour commute. I commute 4 hours a day. I am not willing to stay later than 9:15 Mountain Time. I've only gotten 4 hours of sleep the past 2 nights and I'm dead on my feet. But I'll keep it open for another 15 minutes. Ms. Reuter, did you have anything further? Because I did answer a question. I don't know if it raised another question in your mind.
Well, I'm just wondering what were the other proposals, and that doesn't mean I'm asking you to answer that.
Oh, yeah.
I can dig deeper and find them. I just know that I've been a little L. I called myself L, libertarian leaning, all my voting life. And I finally went all in only a few years ago. I'm a big L. And I am so committed now to our success. And one of the most frustrating things that I've been watching in the short time I've been deeply involved has been we keep more and more seem to be emulating the very state that we're fighting. We're even our own duopoly. And I'm thinking something about the structure is problematic. So I'm really deeply interested in that part of the bylaws. So I'm really hoping that we get a chance to talk about that at a town hall, if it isn't one that came up tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Reuter. I could just tell you briefly, the other proposals are to eliminate regional reps and make the LNC smaller. So going from 17 to 13 or 11 or 12, somewhere in that range, and converting regional seats into at-large seats. That is one of them. The one that I've heard would get proposed from the floor is to eliminate regionals and move to a directorship model, which is like you would have a membership director, a communications director, where it would have the somebody on the LNC actually running for a specific skill set, fundraising, whatever it might be, and they would be directly accountable for those results. That is not a proposal that's going to come out of this committee that I'm aware of, but it is one that I know people are working on to move from the floor. I would hope they would show it to the committee so we can help them refine it, but I don't know. And I don't know if anyone on the committee is actually moving the one to eliminate regionals. That would probably happen as a minority report if the other one passed. Me reading the room, and I could be reading it entirely wrong, I think a majority of the committee wants to leave that alone this term because there's other things, but I could be wrong. But those were the other proposals. Just a quick comment. Our structure actually does not, well, I don't know if you mean by emulating the state, but it certainly doesn't emulate the other parties. The membership of the national committee, so the Republicans and Democrats, are over 100. It is very much similar to the proposal to restructure the LNC. This isn't the first time that there's been a structure to try to make it composed of state chairs. A similar proposal, it didn't make it out of committee, but I was on that bylaws committee, was submitted by Andy Craig. And if I remember correctly, it got very favorable ratings in the survey. I don't place that much stock, though, in the survey. So that's just a point of curiosity, but it ended up not getting proposed by the committee. But our structure actually is not like now it might be like the Greens or other third parties, but it's not like the major parties. I'm not familiar with the structure of others. I could tell you a board governance specialist came and spoke with the board and said the LNC is too big. Said 17 plus 8 alternates is way too big. That it should be more of around a dozen.
Thank you for that additional information. And yes, I do see us becoming more like the state. And it's really disheartening because we are supposed to be bottom up, not top down. We're supposed to be decentralized, not centralized. And I just see too much kind of without people necessarily noticing, making it more centralized and making it more top down. And I don't want that for something I'm all in on. So thank you for illuminating more of that, Karen, or Madam Chair, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, Ms. Ruder. I see Mr. Barfield, who hasn't spoken. So I'm going to call on Mr. Barfield next, and then Mr. Madden. So Mr. Barfield.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick note noting the hour here. I too think it would be healthy to revisit the structure of the committee. We are supposed to be a bottom-up organization, and I think it would be healthy to revisit our structure to assure that strength is maintained. And on another note, it's my understanding that there's discussion of a ethics and transparency item. Being a former reporter, you can imagine my surprise when I discovered that there is no wording in our bylaws, and for that matter, I believe a number of the state bylaws that call for ethics and transparency. So I would encourage this body to take that item up and discuss it at their earliest convenience. Thank you.
Mr. Barfield, I believe it is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mullen, I think it's next up, our next bylaws meeting. If not next, it's coming up. It might be the one after that.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Madden, then Mr. Mullen, then Mr. Jacobs.
Yes, Madam Chair, if you would indulge me for a minute, would you be willing to share your screen showing proposal W?
Because let's see what everyone has to say. Because that hasn't passed out of committee yet, to get into the nitty gritty of a specific proposal when there's people who still want to talk, I really don't want to do. I can stick the link to it, or if someone else on the committee can, into chat for anyone who wants to see it. But the committee hasn't hashed this out. But if we get through the line and there's still time, perhaps we can do that. But I want to get to Mr. Molman, Mr. Jacobs, and then we'll see, Mr. Madden.
Okay, thank you, Madam
Sure.
Chair. I just want to continue my thought here that as it was expressed by a few members here, the a restructuring of the LNC, I believe, is a very healthy thing that we should be considering. Personally, I'm in favor of Ken Molman's proposal to expand the LNC to show each individual affiliate having representation among the LNC. And I think it would, in fact, show, or it would alleviate your concern, Madam Chair, about the board getting too large, because what happens is, as a board grows larger, it in essence gets smaller because it relies more on its executive committee to do the day-to-day operations, whereas the board itself would just be an appellate. And I believe that that is much more appropriate for a board in general, rather than a day-to-day operator. And so those are my thoughts. But yeah, if we do have time, please.
Okay, Mr. Madden, thank you. Mr. Molman, then Mr. Jacobs.
I don't think I have to say anything. Mr. Madden stumped for me good there. I was just going to note that we didn't quite go over exactly, there was the talk of the at-large proposal and the floor, but, not a very thorough one. But I think Mr. Madden got the highlights there. So I'm sure that you are correct, Madam Chair. I believe that the ethics is next, which is V. And then we had W and X, which were basically the same things. And I think that's all been actually moved into X now, if I'm not mistaken. But my guess is that V will be our next meeting, and maybe we'll get to X. At least start it, maybe next meeting, hopefully. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs and Mr. Long. Mr. Jacobs.
I will be quite brief. Thank you. I just wanted to note that I would like to comment on when it is pending on the proposals dealing with disaffiliation. That is all. And thank you. It was a very good meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Long.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I am all in favor of Ken's proposal. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Okay, so we do have a few minutes. Let me stop the share here. And I got to go hunt and find, because I had set my screen up just for this report. So you gotta give me a few moments. And because there had been so many between the X and W, I got to go look at the agenda to see what we said about that. Hold on.
And Madam Chair, if you need the link to the last revision, because I did make amendments based on feedback from Mr. Rowlett and some others. So on that one.
Well, I think I had the last ones that were posted to the list. Right. W was withdrawn in favor of X.
Well, I was doing it the other way around, but yes. The point is there's only one proposal.
Right.
There's no
well,
two.
Mr. Rowlett has an alternate that's X2.
Right.
Hold on one moment. I'm going to see if I can pull these up.
I'll email this to you in case it's the wrong. No. Where's this at? Here it is. Compose.
Yeah, Mr. Rowlett's X2 got rid of regionals.
Right.
And made it smaller. Okay, I am going to share my screen. We only have a few moments. I am going to respond to something, though. It is, in fact, true that when you have an LNC of whatever, between 50 and 100, that all it does is resolve down to the executive committee. So the idea of it being larger isn't actually the case. You actually make it smaller and not directly elected at the delegates at convention. To me, that's the worst of all possible worlds, because what you'll have is an executive committee that's just elected by the state chairs, and not necessarily by delegates based upon skill set for officers. It removes it from the power of the delegates and resolves it into the state chairs. That is moving it up a level in one respect. Now, you might think it's putting power down a level, but it's already been said, and this is why Andy Craig's never made it out of committee, because it ends up resolving down into an executive committee of 7 that aren't even elected by the delegates. To me, it gives the appearance of more bottom up, and it actually isn't. It just resolves it into the state chairs rather than the delegates. If I have to choose between state chairs having power or the delegates at convention, I'm going to pick the delegates at convention every time when it comes to the LNC. What the problem is that people expect too much of the LNC when the actual power of the party needs to be at the state level. The national party should be doing much less. The national party should only be doing things that require economies of scale and putting on a convention and supporting the presidential nomination. That's all the LNC should be doing. It's this weird impulse we have in this party of wanting a national savior, where the emails we get, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? It's not the role of the LNC. It's the role of your state party. Mr. Molman, then Mr. Long, then Mr. Madden, but we might run out of time. Is my screen sharing?
It is.
But I think I have the wrong. Oh yeah, no, this is the alternate for. Wait, yeah, this is yours.
This is the correct one. This is mine. So Ms. Harlos, or Madam Chair, sorry, we're still in the meeting. Madam Chair, I think you just struck on the chord that I'm trying to reach with this, is that it should be more about the states. And, every person who's a delegate at their state convention gets to vote on their state chair. It does. I didn't even know Andy Craig proposed this. That's like the first time I think I've ever agreed with Andy Craig. That's weird. But I do have a provision that makes it so it's not just the state chair, because the feedback I initially got on this was from some state chairs, and they said, I don't want any piece of that. Okay, that's cool. So by default, the state chair or their designee, the state chair can designate somebody, but we also leave it up to the state affiliates to, if they want, amend their bylaws to put somebody on the committee. So it's up to them. I don't care how the person gets there. My main things on this is that it's going, well, I've got a whole list of things, and we'll get into debate, of course, but when it's time. But I like, so the Greens do 3 people from each state. The Republicans do the chair and vice chair from each state. The Democrats do some crazy thing where it's the chairs and vice chairs, but then everybody who's elected above a certain level and some so there's like 1,000 and something people on the Democratic National Committee. The organizations, the quote unquote largest parties that run the way we do, it's us and the Constitution Party, and the Constitution Party is basically dead. I haven't seen, we've got some new parties that have popped up here recently, Forward and all those guys, and I have no idea how they're structured. I think I somehow envision like there's just an altar where you have to go worship Andrew Yang and promise to give your first child to him. But the point, I guess, is that it's not an unknown structure. It's a thing. Like I said, I don't want to get into debate on it all, but because that's not the time to do this. But I think it's here. I encourage people to read it, to look through it. And the only thing I would state is if you see a technical error, or if you say, hey, there's a better way to do this, I'm always open to a better way to do things. So if you read it, you see something you want to get changed, let's talk about it. That's what I would put out there.
It's 9:15, but I'm going to keep it for another 5 minutes just to get through the line. Mr. Long and then Mr. Madden.
Yeah, I favor Mr. Ken Mullen's approach here, because I do think there needs to be checks and balances between the National Party, or LNC, and the state affiliates. And I believe you hit the nail on the hammer, Ms. Carlos, when you stated that You know, the bulk of the power should be with the states. And I think the LNC has probably more power than the state affiliates. So what his proposal would do, as far as I understand, would provide a means of checks and balances. So it would basically balance out.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Madden?
So, to kind of pile on in here with this, one thing, so Kentucky already has a proof of concept which has shown itself to work. Mr. Mullman would be better suited to talk about that as an individual instance. But other than that, I guess the best way to describe this would be changing the LNC to more of a senatorial body. And believe it or not, before the 17th Amendment was instituted, the Senate worked perfectly fine as a representative body of each state. And that's what we're looking to do here. While you may take the officer elections away from the delegates, I would argue that officers are not necessarily put, or I should say officer candidates put in front of the delegates are not necessarily skilled or the best fit, I guess, because we're talking about a popular vote. And really what it boils down to at the very end of the day is celebritarianism, which I believe that has had a large draw from, or how do I word this? A large increase or lessening of demand for celebritarianism within the party. And I want to be clear, I'm not making any assertions on current members, but I'm just saying structurally and functionally, this would do better because whoever the representative is, it's not necessarily the chairs of each party. And I would even say probably don't do that. I would discourage that within affiliate bylaws because chairs need to focus on their states. But whoever is designated for representation to national should probably have a vested interest in skilled labor on the executive committee. You want a chief executive officer for a chair. You want a chief operations officer for a vice chair. You want a chief financial officer for a treasurer. You want a chief knowledge officer for secretary, which Ms. Harless, or Madam Chair, you have done phenomenally as a chief knowledge officer because you both do historical and minutes and matters of secretarial work and whatnot. So I think that there wouldn't be an issue there. But just in terms of officers, you have these designated roles that don't always get filled by the most meritorious of people, I guess should be said. Whereas right now, what you have in essence is a chair with an executive director model. Instead, that should be one person. That the chair should be the chief executive of the party. And right now we have a separation between executives. So I think that would be probably best. That's why I support this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Madden. Okay, we are at 9:20. So that's going to conclude for this evening. I thank everyone for coming, and we again will, as I described, be having additional town halls and again potentially a mock convention. Our regular committee meetings are also open to any member. They are published on the party website. They're not quite as open as this one, meaning you'll have an opportunity for public comment and then the discussion is limited to the committee. But there is an opportunity for public comment and you can hear what the committee has to say, and in it doing its work. Just an FYI, though I know there's some disagreement on the committee, so this may not happen. It's my intent, and I can be overruled by the committee, is to put a temporary hard stop. So hard stop might not be the word, but a hard pause the end of October on proposals, no matter where we're at. And even though we have a bunch more, to clean up what we do have and resolve competing proposals and start to organize our thoughts, because things are really turning into a little bit of a bramble bush. So if the committee doesn't overrule me on that, that's my intention, but there has been some disagreement, so it's probably going to come to a committee vote. With the holidays, I'd like to have us just work on cleaning up what we already have between November and December. Realistically, let's say this was the end. This was our report. I don't think we're going to get through all of this at National Convention. It starts to get to a point where it's not as if we have floor time that's unlimited. We have, I think, 4 hours. It's a 6. I'm getting confused now between what happened. Yeah, it's at least 4. It might be. I know I've been pushing for more, and I've actually been looking to take some time away from platform because bylaws didn't get heard last term and platform did. And so, but let's just plan on 4. What we have now, we're not going to get through in 4 hours. I've been to enough conventions to know that. So we're going to have to make some hard decisions at some point. The committee, I know some members of the committee disagree. I think it's very frustrating to members to have a report of 50 proposals where they feel like they have to sit and study it because they don't know if someone's going to move one up, if they're all going to get heard. And then you only hear 20 of them and they feel like you wasted your time for 30 proposals. It's my intention to ask the committee to only put in the report what we realistically can expect to pass in that time frame, but the committee could choose to put in 10,000 proposals. It's the committee's decision. I know the argument's been made, well, then it gives groundwork for the next committee. It's not groundwork for the next committee. It's a heavy anchor on the weight of the next committee to feel like they have to consider proposals from a committee they weren't even part of. The only time I ever consider that valid is when the report wasn't heard, like it wasn't last time, and as has happened to platform. So it's my goal only to present what we can realistically do in that time frame. So just keep that in mind, but there is dissension on the committee, and the committee might make another decision, not the ruler, just the guide. Yeah. So again, thank you, everyone. Please be on the lookout at lp.org for our next meeting. Will be in 2 weeks. So what date is that? In case anyone wants to come. And you can subscribe to the bylaws list so you get an email for the next meeting. It will be October 5th. And then we'll have another meeting October 19th. And where I am suggesting the hard pause is going to be November 9th. So we have about 4 more meetings before I'm going to suggest a hard pause. Okay, everyone, I hope you have an awesome night. And I do thank you for coming. It's been very encouraging to see how many people were here. Thank you. Have a good night.